I never imagined my father would look me straight in the eyes and tell me I wasn't good enough to run the business I'd helped build from the ground up. But there I was, standing in the barrel room of Turner Family Vineyards, surrounded by the oak casks I'd selected myself, listening to him say the words that shattered a decade of dedication. "Your brother Eric will be taking over as CEO now." The room seemed to spin around me. Outside the window, rows of vines stretched toward the horizon, vines I'd painstakingly converted to organic cultivation over the past 7 years. The afternoon sun caught the awards displayed on the wall, including the sustainability medal we'd won last year based on the program I'd developed. "What do you mean Eric is taking over?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "He just moved back to Sonoma 6 months ago. He hasn't worked a single harvest." My father, Harold Turner, founder of Turner Family Vineyards, adjusted his reading glasses and cleared his throat the way he always did when he was about to deliver what he considered an indisputable pronouncement. "Becca," he said, using the nickname I'd outgrown years ago. "Eric has fresh ideas. He's got an MBA from Stanford, and he understands the direction the market is headed. With his connections, we can take this business to the next level." I almost laughed. "Dad, I also have an MBA. I've been running operations for 10 years. Our revenues are up 40% since I implemented the direct-to-consumer program. I secured the Westfield distribution deal that literally saved us during the pandemic." "And we appreciate all that," my father said, patting my hand in a way that made me feel like a child being dismissed. "You'll still be involved. Eric will need your expertise in operations. I'm thinking Director of Production would be a suitable title." Director of Production, a demotion to working under my younger brother, who had spent the last decade traveling through Europe and Asia, finding himself while I was up at 5 a.m. every day running this place. The brother who couldn't tell a Cabernet from a Merlot 3 years ago. I felt my throat tighten. "Why? Just tell me why, Dad." He sighed, looking uncomfortable. "Turner Vineyards has always been passed down to the next generation, Becca. It's a family tradition." "I'm family," I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts. "Last time I checked, I was your firstborn." "You know what I mean," he replied, his tone hardening. "The business passes to the son. That's how my father did it, and his father before him." And there it was, the real reason, finally spoken aloud after years of suspecting it was true. It didn't matter that I'd poured my heart and soul into this place, that I knew every inch of our 100 acres, that I could recite our production numbers going back 5 years. What mattered was that I was a daughter, not a son. "That's ridiculous," I said, clenching my fist to keep my hands from shaking. "It's 2025, Dad. You can't be serious." "I've made my decision, Rebecca," he said, using my full name, a sure sign that the conversation was over. "Eric starts next Monday. I expect you to help make this transition smooth." Before I could respond, the door to the barrel room swung open, and there was Eric, with his perfect smile and designer clothes that had never seen a day of actual work in the vineyard. Behind him stood our mother, Diane, her expression a mix of apprehension and forced cheerfulness. "Hey, sis," Eric said, oblivious to the tension in the room. "Dad tell you the good news? We're going to take this place to the stratosphere." I looked from Eric to my father, then to my mother, who quickly averted her eyes. None of them could see what they were doing, the injustice of it, the casual cruelty. "Congratulations," I managed to say, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. "Excuse me, I need some air." I brushed past them, ignoring my mother's soft, "Becca, please," as I stormed out into the vineyard. The late afternoon sun was hanging low over the western hills, casting long shadows across the rows of Pinot Noir I'd planted myself after convincing Dad that we needed to diversify our varieties. I pulled out my phone and called the only person who would understand. My husband Nathan answered on the second ring. "Hey, everything okay? You're still at the vineyard?" His voice was instantly concerned. He knew I'd been called to a family meeting that afternoon. "They're giving it to Eric," I said, my voice finally breaking. 10 years, Nate. 10 years I've worked here, and they're handing it to Eric because he's the son. Nathan was quiet. For a moment, then said exactly what I needed to hear. "Come home. We'll figure this out together." As I drove down the winding road from the vineyard toward our home in town, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, raw and throbbing, but beneath it something else was taking shape, a steel-hard resolve. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I just didn't realize then how much I was about to lose, and what I would eventually gain by standing up for myself. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The following week was the longest of my life. I watched as Eric took over my office, the one with the view of the Western Vineyard that I'd earned after increasing our wine club membership by 200%. He rearranged everything, removing the production, charts I'd carefully created, and replacing them with motivational posters featuring mountain climbers and soaring eagles. I was now working from what had essentially been a storage room, hastily converted into an office with a desk that wobbled and a chair that creaked every time I moved. Eric had suggested I could spruce it up with some plants. "It'll be cozy," he'd said with that smile that never quite reached his eyes. It was Wednesday afternoon when I overheard him speaking to the Westfield Group, our biggest distributor, the account I'd nurtured for 3 years, taking their buyer to dinner every time she was in town, remembering her children's names, sending her bottles of our limited reserve for Christmas. "We're thinking of raising our wholesale prices next quarter," Eric was saying, leaning back in my old chair, feet propped on my old desk. "The market can bear it, especially with our new label design." I froze in the hallway. Raising prices would violate the agreement I'd negotiated, the one that guaranteed Westfield exclusive pricing in exchange for doubling their order volume. I knocked and entered without waiting for a response. "Eric, can I talk to you for a minute? It's about the Westfield account." He held up a finger, smiling into the phone. "Sarah, let me call you right back. My production manager needs me." Production manager. Not even director anymore. After he hung up, I closed the door behind me. "You can't raise prices on Westfield. We have an agreement." "The agreement you made was too generous," he interrupted. "Dad agrees. We're leaving money on the table." I took a deep breath. "That agreement is why we survived 2023 when 3 other vineyards in the valley went under. Sarah doubled her order when she didn't need to, because of our relationship." Eric shrugged. "Business isn't about relationships, Becca. It's about margins." "In the wine business, it's about both," I insisted. "Break this agreement, and they'll drop us. I guarantee it." "I think I know what I'm doing," he said dismissively. "Dad put me in charge for a reason." "Because you're his son," I said flatly. His expression hardened. "No, because I have vision. Dad sees it. Why can't you?" I left without another word, my hands shaking with anger. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the business I'd helped build, the employees whose livelihoods depended on it, the legacy I'd thought I was creating for my own children. That evening, I was quiet during dinner. Nathan tried to engage me in conversation, asking about my day, but I just pushed food around on my plate. Zoe, our 12-year-old, was sharp enough to notice. "Mom, are you mad because Uncle Eric is the boss now?" she asked, setting down her fork. I looked at my daughter, so perceptive, so straightforward. "I'm not mad, honey. I'm disappointed." "Because Grandpa picked Uncle Eric instead of you?" "Zoe," Nathan warned gently, but I shook my head. "It's okay," I told him, then turned to my daughter. "Yes, I worked very hard at the vineyard for a long time, and I thought I would get to run it someday." "Is it because you're a girl?" Tyler, my 9-year-old, piped up. Jason at school said girls can't be bosses. I nearly choked. That is absolutely not true. Women can be bosses, presidents, anything they want to be. Then why did Grandpa pick Uncle Eric? Zoe persisted. I glanced at Nathan, who gave me a look that said this was my call. I could brush it off, make excuses, protect my father's image in my children's eyes, or I could tell them the truth. Because sometimes, I said carefully, people have old-fashioned ideas about what men and women should do. And sometimes even people we love can make unfair decisions because of those ideas. That's stupid, Zoe declared. Yeah, Tyler agreed. You know everything about wine. Uncle Eric doesn't even like the smell. I couldn't help but laugh, feeling a surge of love for my children and their simple sense of justice. Thank you for believing in me. Later, after the kids were in bed, Nathan found me on the back porch, staring out at the small garden I'd planted with cuttings from the vineyard. What are you thinking? He asked. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Handing me a glass of our Reserve Pinot, the vintage I'd overseen from bud break to bottle. I'm thinking that my father isn't going to change, I said, taking a sip. And I'm wondering why I'm still trying to earn his approval when it's clear I never will. Nathan sat beside me. So what do you want to do? I swirled the wine in my glass, watching how it caught the porch light. I don't know yet, but I'm done being the good daughter who accepts whatever scraps they throw my way. Whatever you decide, Nathan said. I'm with you. You know that, right? I nodded, leaning against his shoulder. I know. The next morning, I arrived at the vineyard earlier than usual. I wanted to check the new Chardonnay planting before anyone else was around. The quiet of the vineyard at dawn had always been my favorite time, the fog still clinging to the vines, the air crisp with possibility. I was walking back to the main building when I noticed my father's car already in its parking spot. That was unusual. He rarely came in before 9 these days, citing the privileges of semi-retirement. I found him in the financial office, hunched over a computer with Grace Winters, our bookkeeper who had been with the vineyard since I was a teenager. Morning, I said, pausing in the doorway. You're in early. My father jumped slightly, looking almost guilty. Rebecca, yes, just going over some numbers with Grace. Grace met my eyes briefly, then looked away. Something was off. What numbers? I asked, stepping into the room. Just routine matters, my father said dismissively. Nothing for you to worry about. Before I could press further, Eric appeared behind me. Dad, there you are. Oh, hey sis. Eric, I acknowledged coolly. You're in early too. Big day, he said with a grin. We're meeting with the marketing team about the rebranding. Rebranding? This was the first I'd heard of it. What rebranding? Eric and my father exchanged glances. We're updating the Turner Family Vineyards image, Eric explained. New logo, new labels, new everything. Bringing us into the modern era. Our brand has recognition, I protested. We've won awards. People know our labels. People know the old Turner, Eric said. We're creating the new Turner, sleeker, more upscale. At what cost? I asked. That's not your concern? Anymore, my father interjected. Eric is handling the creative direction now. I felt my face flush. So I don't even get input on a complete rebranding of the business I've helped run for a decade? You'll be consulted on production matters, my father said, his tone making it clear the discussion was over. I looked from him to Eric, then to Grace, who was staring fixedly at her computer screen. Fine, I said finally. Just don't come running to me when this falls apart. I turned to leave, but Eric's voice stopped me. Oh, and sis? We need the Production report for the last quarter. The investors are asking. I froze. What investors? Another exchanged glance between father and son. Dad's been talking to some investment groups, Eric said casually. Potential minority stakeholders. Nothing major. Nothing major. Just selling off pieces of our family business. The business my grandparents had started from nothing. The business I'd poured my life into. When were you going to tell me this? I demanded. When it became relevant to your role, my father replied. I had never been so close to walking out. Right then, in that moment, I wanted to tell them both. Exactly what they could do with their new Turner. But something stopped me. The thought of all the employees who depended on us, the knowledge of what could happen if Eric and my father ran this place into the ground with their vision. I'll email you the production report, I said stiffly, and left before I said something I couldn't take back. That evening, I stayed late, sitting alone in my sad little office, pulling together information I'd need if things got worse. I copied key contacts, contract details, production data. Nothing proprietary. I wasn't stooping to that level, but information I'd worked hard to develop. As I was preparing to leave, Grace knocked on my door. You're still here, she said, sounding relieved. I was hoping to catch you alone. What's going on, Grace? I asked. This morning, with my father. She closed the door and sat down across from me. Grace had been my ally for years. She'd taught me bookkeeping when I first joined the business, had encouraged me when my ideas were dismissed in meetings. They're looking for outside investment because they're planning a major expansion, she said quietly. They want to build a second tasting room, add a restaurant, even start a wine safari experience. I stared at her. That would cost millions. $5 million, according to the projections Eric showed your father. We don't have that kind of capital, I said, stunned. Not without taking on significant debt or selling a major stake. Grace nodded grimly. They're planning to sell 40%. 40%? I echoed in disbelief. That's not minority investment? That's nearly half the business. Eric has convinced your father it's the only way to compete with the corporate wineries moving into the valley. I shook my head, trying to process this. Does my mother know? I don't think so, Grace said. It's been just the three of us in these meetings. Your father, Eric, and me running the numbers. I leaned back in my chair, the full weight of what was happening finally hitting me. They weren't just pushing me aside. They were fundamentally changing the business, risking everything my family had built. There's more, Grace said hesitantly. The Westfield contract. Eric's planning to terminate it if they don't accept the price increase. He can't do that, I said automatically. There are penalties, not to mention the relationship damage. He says he's already lined up another distributor, someone he knows from business school. I closed my eyes, feeling a headache building behind my temples. This is insane. I thought you should know, Grace said, standing up. I've worked for your family for 20 years. This place matters to me, too. After she left, I sat in the darkening office for a long time. I thought about my grandfather who'd planted the first vines, about my childhood running through these same vineyards, about the pride I'd felt watching our wines gain recognition and respect. I thought about my children, especially Zoe, who loved to help during harvest, who had already declared she wanted to make wine someday. And I thought about what would be left of all that if Eric and my father had their way. I pulled out my phone and texted Nathan. We need to talk. I've made a decision. By the time I got home, I knew exactly what I had to do. It wasn't going to be easy. In fact, it would be the hardest thing I'd ever done. But for the first time, in weeks, I felt a sense of clarity. The Turner family was about to discover that they'd underestimated me for the last time. That night, I spread my documents across our dining room table after the kids were asleep. Nathan sat beside me, quietly reviewing the financial reports I'd brought home. "They're going to destroy everything," I said, running my fingers through my hair. "A wine safari? Seriously? We're a boutique winery known for sustainable practices and limited production, not some tourist trap." Nathan studied the projected costs Grace had slipped me. "These numbers are ambitious. Even with outside investment, the debt service would be crushing." "It's worse than that," I said, pulling out another paper. "Look at the production forecasts. They want to triple our output." Nathan's eyebrows shot up. "Your vines can't support that. You'd have to buy grapes from outside sources." "Exactly. And that completely undermines our estate-grown sustainable brand identity." I paced the dining room, energy coursing through me despite the late hour. For the first time since my father's announcement, I wasn't just hurt. I was angry. And that anger was clarifying. "So, what's your plan?" Nathan asked, watching me carefully. I stopped pacing and faced him. "I'm going to protect what I built, starting tomorrow." The next morning, I called Sarah at Westfield Distribution before going to the vineyard. Our conversation was brief, but productive. Then I contacted 3 of our key wine club members, influential restaurant owners who had been loyal supporters for years. By the time I pulled into the vineyard parking lot, I had a strategy. My father's car wasn't there yet, but Eric's was. Perfect. I found him in the tasting room with Vanessa, his wife. They were discussing changes to the decor, gesturing grandly at the rustic wooden beams my grandfather had salvaged from an old barn. "Those will have to go," Vanessa was saying, wrinkling her nose. "They're so farmhouse chic. We need something more elevated." "Morning," I said, making them both turn. Eric looked surprised to see me. "You're here early." "I work here," I reminded him. "And I need to talk to you, privately." Vanessa gave me a cold smile. "I'll wait in the car, honey. Don't forget we have brunch with the Prestons at 11. She kissed Eric's cheek and sauntered out, her designer heels clicking on the wooden floor. When she was gone, I closed the tasting room door. "I spoke with Sarah at Westfield this morning." Eric's expression shifted. "You had no right to contact our distributors without—" "Sarah called me, actually," I lied smoothly. "She was concerned about rumors of a price increase." Eric's face reddened. "What did you tell her?" I assured her there must be some misunderstanding, that Turner Vineyards would never violate the terms of our agreement, that we value our relationship too much. He stepped forward, his posture stiffening. "That wasn't your call to make." "No? Then whose was it? Because it certainly wasn't yours to jeopardize our largest distribution channel." "You don't understand modern business," Eric snapped. "Sometimes you have to take risks to grow." Destroying. Relationships isn't risk, it's sabotage. I moved closer. "And I won't let you sabotage this vineyard." Eric laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What exactly do you think you can do? Dad made his decision. I'm in charge now." "For now," I agreed. "But here's what you should know. I've spent 10 years building relationships with every buyer, supplier, and influencer in this valley. People respect me. They trust my word. If I tell them Turner quality is about to plummet because we're buying cheap grapes from Central Valley, they'll believe me." His eyes widened slightly. "You wouldn't." "I also have documentation of every decision made in the past decade, including Dad's. Creative accounting during the drought years." I was bluffing about the accounting, but Eric didn't know that. "Are you threatening us?" His voice was incredulous. "I'm giving you a choice," I corrected. "You can either work with me as an equal partner, giving me real authority over operations and vineyard management, or I can make sure your big expansion plans never get off the ground." "Dad will never agree to that." "Then I guess you'll have to convince him," I said, turning to leave. "You have until the end of the week." I walked out, feeling a strange mix of power and terror. I had just delivered an ultimatum to my family. There was no going back now. When I reached my office, Grace was waiting for me. Her face was pale. "What's wrong?" I asked, closing the door. "Harold knows I spoke to you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was furious. Said I betrayed his trust." My stomach dropped. "I'm so sorry, Grace. I never meant to put you in that position." She shook her head. "Don't apologize. I made my choice, but you should know they're meeting with the investors tomorrow. Some venture capital firm from San Francisco." "So soon?" "Eric's pushing it through. And there's something else." She hesitated. "They've started reviewing everyone's position, talking about streamlining operations." I felt cold. "They're planning layoffs." Grace nodded grimly. "Starting with anyone they consider loyal to you." The implications hit me hard. My confrontation with Eric hadn't just put my position at risk, it had endangered people who had worked alongside me for years. People with families, mortgages. "I need to think," I said, sinking into my chair. Grace squeezed my shoulder before leaving. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." I spent the morning in a fog, going through the motions of my job while my mind raced. The production team needed approvals for the new bottling run. The organic certification inspector needed schedules confirmed. Routine tasks that now felt hollow. Around 11, my mother appeared at my office door. Diane Turner was the consummate winery wife. Elegant, diplomatic, always smoothing things over. She rarely involved herself in business operations. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice gentle. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What can I do for you, Mom?" She sat, adjusting her cashmere sweater. "Your father told me about your conversation with Eric. He's very upset." Of course he was. "And what about you?" I asked. "Are you upset too?" "I'm concerned," she said carefully. "This is causing a rift in the family." I leaned forward. "The rift started when Dad decided I wasn't good enough to run this place. Because I'm a woman." My mother flinched. "It's not that simple, Becca." "It is that simple. Dad literally said the business passes to the son." Those were his exact words. "Your father is from a different generation," she said, as if that explained everything. "He believes in tradition." "Tradition," I repeated, flatly. Like when Grandma wasn't allowed to have her name on the incorporation papers despite providing half the startup money? That kind of tradition? My mother looked away. It was an old family story, one rarely mentioned. My grandmother had used her inheritance to help my grandfather start the vineyard, but the business was registered solely in his name. It had always bothered me. "Times were different then," she murmured. "And they're different now too," I insisted. "But Dad is still treating me like it's 1950. She sighed. "What do you want, Rebecca? To tear the family apart? To damage the business your grandfather built?" "I want recognition for my work. I want equality. And I want to protect this vineyard from Eric's harebrained expansion schemes." "Eric has vision," my mother said, echoing my father's words. "Eric has ego," I corrected, "and Dad is so blinded by his antiquated beliefs that he can't see it." My mother stood up, smoothing her slacks. "I'm asking you, as your mother, to find a way to make peace, for the family's sake." I looked at her, this woman who had spent her life accommodating, compromising, smoothing things over. I loved her, but I didn't want to become her. "I've spent my entire career making peace, Mom, accepting less than I deserved. Not anymore." She looked genuinely sad as she turned to leave. "I hope you reconsider." After she left, I checked my email and found a message from Sarah at Westfield. She was concerned about rumors of Turner Vineyards seeking new distribution channels. Could we meet for lunch? I responded immediately, suggesting a place in town. This was my chance to secure our most important business relationship, with or without Eric's approval. Sarah was already at the restaurant when I arrived, sipping a glass of wine that I noted wasn't one of ours. She stood to greet me with a warm hug. "Becca, it's been too long," she said as we sat down. "Though I have to admit, I was surprised to get that call from your brother yesterday. Eric can be impulsive," I said carefully. "He's still learning the business." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Is that what we're calling it?" Because to me, it sounded like he was fishing for new pricing arrangements while hinting he had other options. "Eric doesn't speak for the vineyard," I said firmly. "Not on distribution matters." "Your father seems to think he does," Sarah said, taking another sip of wine. "Harold called me this morning to reinforce Eric's position." My heart sank. Dad was already backing Eric's play. "Sarah, you and I have worked together for years. You know our wines, our process, our commitment to quality. None of that has changed." "But management has," she pointed out. "And I need to know what that means for Westfield. We have restaurant clients who've built wine lists around your Pinot. If you're changing direction, I need warning." I took a deep breath. It was time to play my hand. "What if I told you I'm considering starting my own label?" Sarah paused, glass halfway to her lips. "I'd say I'm very interested in hearing more. It would be small production, focused on the sustainable methods I've developed at Turner, a true artisan approach." "With you as winemaker?" I nodded. "Complete creative control." Sarah's eyes gleamed. "Our high-end accounts would be all over that." "Your name carries weight, Becca." "I'd need a distribution partner, someone who understands the market, who already has the relationships." "Someone like Westfield," she said, smiling now. "Exactly." Sarah set down her glass. "Are you really considering this?" "I'm exploring options," I said carefully. "Nothing's decided. But I wanted you to know that whatever happens with Turner Vineyards, you and I can still do business." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Send me a proposal when you're ready. I'd be honored to distribute your wines." The rest of lunch was spent catching up on industry news, but my mind was racing. I'd just opened a door I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. Starting my own label would mean leaving Turner Vineyards, leaving my family's legacy. But it would also mean freedom. When I returned to the vineyard, I found several employees huddled in the lab, speaking in hushed tones. They fell silent when I entered. "What's going on?" I asked. Miguel, our vineyard manager who had worked alongside me for 8 years, spoke first. "Is it true they're selling half the business to outsiders?" Word was spreading. I chose my words carefully. "There are discussions about bringing in investors. Nothing is finalized." "And the layoffs?" asked Tina, one of our cellar workers. "People are saying Eric wants to replace us with cheaper contract labor." I felt a surge of protectiveness toward my team. "I won't let that happen." "With respect, Becca," Miguel said gently, "how can you stop it? Everyone knows Eric is in charge now." The question hung in the air. These people trusted me. They'd followed my lead, implemented my programs, celebrated our successes together, and now I couldn't protect them. "I'm still fighting," I said. Finally. "That's all I can tell you right now." They nodded, but I could see the uncertainty in their eyes. I was losing my authority by the hour. That evening, I skipped the usual family dinner at my parents' house. Instead, I took Nathan and the kids to our favorite pizza place in town. Watching Zoe and Tyler laugh as they stretched cheese between their slices, I felt a wave of clarity wash over me. "I think I might leave the vineyard," I said quietly to Nathan while the kids were distracted. He looked at me carefully. "You're sure?" "No," I admitted. "But I'm thinking about it seriously. I talked to Sarah about distributing My own label. Your own wines, he said thoughtfully. That's a big step. It's terrifying, I agreed. But maybe it's time. I've spent a decade proving myself to people who will never truly see my value. Nathan took my hand. Whatever you decide, we'll make it work. It would mean starting over, taking a risk. You've never been afraid of risk, he reminded me. It's one of the things I love about you. I squeezed his hand, grateful for his unwavering support. There's one more factor to consider. What's that? I'm worried about what Eric and Dad will do to the vineyard, to the employees, to everything we've built. Nathan considered this. So it's not just about you. It never has been, I said softly. We were interrupted by Tyler asking for another slice, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. But that night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I kept circling back to the same question. Was I willing to walk away from the family business to save it? The next morning, I arrived at the vineyard to find an unfamiliar car in the parking lot, a sleek black Tesla with San Francisco plates. The investors had arrived. I slipped in through the production entrance, avoiding the main office where they would likely be meeting. I needed to gather more information before confronting my father and Eric. In the lab, I found Tina running tests on our latest vintage. Any news? I asked casually. She glanced around to make sure we were alone. They've been in the conference room for an hour. Some venture capital guys in expensive suits. Do you know what they're discussing? Tina hesitated. Grace took in the financial projections earlier. She looked worried. Thanks, I said, squeezing her shoulder. Keep me posted if you hear anything else. I spent the morning in the vineyard with Miguel, inspecting the new plantings and discussing the upcoming harvest. Being among the vines always centered me, reminded me why I loved this work. The connection to the land, the cycle of growth, the promise of creation. We were heading back when Miguel spotted them, my father, Eric, and two men in business suits walking through the eastern vineyard. The tour, Miguel muttered. Let's go say hello, I said with forced brightness. As we approached, I saw Eric's expression darken. My father looked equally displeased. Rebecca, he said stiffly. I didn't realize you were in the vineyard today. Just checking on the new Pinot block with Miguel, I said pleasantly. The fruit set is looking excellent. I turned to the visitors with professional warmth. Rebecca Turner, I said, extending my hand. Operations Director. Kevin Zhao, said the taller of the two, shaking my hand firmly. This is my partner, Alec Bennett. We're with Meridian Capital. Welcome to Turner Vineyards, I said. I see my father and brother are giving you the tour. They're showing us the expansion potential, Kevin said. The property has remarkable development opportunities. I kept my smile fixed in place. It certainly does. Though, of course, our greatest asset is our terroir, the unique combination of soil, climate, and cultivation practices that make our wines distinctive. Rebecca has been experimenting with organic methods, my father interjected, making it sound like a hobby rather than the comprehensive sustainability program I'd implemented. Not experimenting, I corrected gently. Our entire operation has been certified organic for 3 years. Now, we've seen improved soil health, increased biodiversity, and most importantly, more complex flavor development in the grapes. Kevin looked interested. That's impressive. Sustainability is becoming a key differentiator in the premium market. Exactly, I agreed. Our environmental practices are integral to our brand identity. Eric cleared his throat. We should continue the tour. We've got a lot of ground to cover before lunch. Of course, I said smoothly. I won't keep you. But I'd love to join you for lunch if that's possible. I could share some insights about our production capabilities. Before Eric could object, Kevin nodded. I'd appreciate that. We're still in the information gathering phase. Excellent, I said. I'll see you at the main house at noon. I walked away feeling Eric's glare burning into my back. He knew what I was doing, inserting myself into the negotiations, making sure my voice was heard. It was a small victory, but I'd take it. Back in my office, I quickly pulled together materials that highlighted my contributions to the vineyard's success, market, analysis showing our growth compared to competitors, press clippings from when we won sustainability awards, financial data demonstrating the profitability of our limited production model. At noon, I arrived at my parents' house on the property, where my mother was hosting lunch for the investors. Eric was already there, deep in conversation with Alec while my father poured wine. My mother greeted me with surprise. "Rebecca, I didn't know you were joining us." "Last-minute addition," I said, kissing her cheek. Kevin wanted to discuss production capacity. She gave me a warning look but said nothing as she went to check on lunch. I approached the group, accepting a glass of our reserve Chardonnay from my father. "Gentlemen, I brought some additional information you might find useful." I distributed the folders I'd prepared. Kevin immediately began flipping through his, nodding with interest. "These sustainability metrics are impressive," he noted. "You've reduced water usage by 30% while increasing yield?" "Drought-resistant rootstock and precision irrigation," I explained. "It was a significant initial investment, but the long-term savings are substantial." "And you led this initiative?" Alec asked. "Rebecca has managed our day-to-day operations for several years," my father said before I could answer. "But Eric is bringing fresh perspective to our strategic direction." "A combination of experience and innovation," Kevin observed diplomatically. "Always valuable." Eric shifted uncomfortably. "The expansion plans will take us beyond these small-scale methods. We need to think bigger." "Bigger isn't always better in winemaking," I countered. "Our premium pricing is directly tied to our limited production and meticulous methods." "The market is changing," Eric insisted. "Meridian understands this. Their portfolio includes several successful scaled wine operations." Kevin set down his folder. "We've certainly had success with growth-oriented brands, but we've also backed boutique operations that maintain premium positioning, different models for different market segments." "Exactly," I said, seizing the opening. "And Turner Vineyards has always been positioned as an artisanal, estate-grown product. That's our competitive advantage." My father's jaw tightened. "We're exploring new directions." "Without alienating our existing customer base," I added smoothly. The tension in the room was palpable as my mother announced that lunch was served. We moved to the dining room, where a beautiful spread of local cheeses, fresh bread, and seasonal salads awaited us. Throughout the meal, I continued to emphasize the value of our current business model while acknowledging the potential for measured growth. Eric grew increasingly agitated, repeatedly cutting me off or contradicting my points. Finally, as my mother served coffee, Kevin addressed me directly. "Rebecca, given your experience with the operation, what would be your recommendation for Turner's next phase?" I felt all eyes on me. This was my chance. "I believe in strategic expansion that honors our core values," I said carefully. "Increasing production within the constraints of our estate-grown philosophy. Perhaps adding higher margin offerings like exclusive wine club experiences or limited edition varietals, but maintaining the quality and authenticity that distinguish us from corporate wineries." "Small thinking," Eric muttered. "Sustainable thinking," I corrected. "Growth that doesn't compromise what makes us special." Kevin and Alec exchanged glances. "Both approaches have merit," Kevin said diplomatically. "We'd need to review the financial projections for each scenario before making any recommendations." My father stood abruptly. "We should continue this discussion privately. Rebecca, thank you for your input, but Eric and I will handle the remainder of the meeting." I recognized the dismissal but stood my ground. "Of course. Kevin, Alec, it was a pleasure meeting you both. I hope you'll consider all perspectives before making your decision. As I left, I heard my father apologizing for the confusion about my role. I walked back to my office with my head held high, ignoring the burning in my throat. I had made my case. I had shown the investors that there was more to Turner Vineyards than Eric's grandiose schemes. Whether it would make any difference remained to be seen. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. Impressive presentation today. Would like to continue the conversation. Coffee tomorrow? Kevin Z. I stared at my phone, pulse quickening. The lead investor wanted to meet with me privately. This changed everything. I texted back, name the time and place. His response came quickly. 7 a.m. Harvest Cafe in town. Discreet. I showed the exchange to Nathan when I got home. What do you think he wants? Nathan considered it. Information, most likely. He's doing his due diligence, talking to all key players. Or he's concerned about the tension he witnessed today, I suggested. Either way, it's an opportunity, Nathan said. But be careful. These guys didn't build a venture capital firm by being sentimental. I nodded, already forming a strategy for the meeting. I need to show him I'm the safe bet, the one who truly understands this business. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept cycling through scenarios, possible outcomes, things I should say or avoid saying. By morning, I was exhausted but focused. I arrived at Harvest Cafe 10 minutes early and chose a table in the back corner. Kevin walked in precisely at 7, dressed more casually than the day before, but still impeccable in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater. Thanks for meeting me, he said as he sat down. I appreciate the discretion. Of course, I replied. I assume my father and brother don't know about this conversation. He gave a slight smile. I make it a practice to speak with all key stakeholders independently. It provides a clearer picture. After ordering coffee, Kevin got straight to the point. The dynamic I observed yesterday concerns me. Family businesses are complex, and tension in leadership can be problematic for investors. I understand your concern, I said, choosing my words carefully. The recent transition has been abrupt. Your father seems firmly committed to positioning your brother as CEO. He is, I acknowledged, despite my longer tenure and demonstrable results. Kevin studied me. Yet you continue to advocate for the business. Most people in your position would have walked away by now. Turner Vineyards isn't just my workplace, I explained. It's my heritage. And more importantly, it's my professional accomplishment. I've shaped what this vineyard has become. Which is why I wanted to speak with you directly, Kevin said, leaning forward. Meridian is considering 2 possible approaches to this investment. One aligns with your brother's expansion vision. The other, he paused, would involve a significant restructuring. My pulse quickened. What kind of restructuring? One that might create space for different leadership. I set down my coffee cup carefully. Are you suggesting you would support me over Eric? I'm suggesting that Meridian invests in competence, not family politics, Kevin said bluntly. Your track record is impressive. Your brother's is non-existent. Hope flared in my chest, only to be quickly tempered by suspicion. Why would you go against my father's wishes? He's the majority owner. Harold Turner is approaching retirement age, Kevin observed. And from what I've seen, he's allowing sentiment to overrule business sense. That's his prerogative, but if Meridian invests $40 million in this vineyard, we'll want assurances about who's actually running things. $40 million. The number hit me like a physical force. That was 8 times what Eric had mentioned. The expansion plans require that level of investment? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Kevin's expression shifted slightly. Your brother didn't share the full financial projections with you. It wasn't a question. No, I admitted. He didn't. Kevin pulled out his phone, typed briefly, then turned it to show me a spreadsheet. This is what Eric presented yesterday after you left. I scanned the numbers, my stomach dropping with each line. The plans went far beyond what Grace had told me. A massive hospitality complex, acquiring neighboring properties, a production facility 10 times our current size. This would completely transform the business, I said, struggling to keep my voice level. It's not even the same vineyard anymore. That's the point, Kevin said, taking back his phone. Eric's vision is to create a wine tourism destination that happens to produce wine. Your vision, as I understand it, is to create exceptional wine that attracts visitors. Fundamentally different approaches, I agreed. Kevin nodded. Meridian could support either model, but we need clarity on leadership before proceeding. I took a deep breath. What exactly are you proposing? I'd like you to prepare an alternative business plan, he said. Something that achieves growth without sacrificing the vineyard's identity. Bring it to me directly, not through your father or brother. And if I do this? Then we'd have options to present to the Turner family board. Options that might create leverage for a different leadership structure. I studied him, trying to read his true intentions. Why would you do this? What's in it for Meridian? Kevin smiled. I've been in this business 20 years, Rebecca. I've seen family dramas destroy promising companies. I've also seen what happens when the wrong person takes control of a specialized operation like winemaking. The product suffers, the brand suffers, and ultimately, our investment suffers. He leaned back, gesturing to the cafe around us. Wine isn't like other products. It's about passion, expertise, connection to the land. From everything I've observed, you embody those qualities. Your brother doesn't. I wanted to believe him, but I'd be a fool to trust a venture capitalist I'd just met over my own family, no matter how dysfunctional that family might be. I need time to think about this, I said finally. Of course, Kevin replied, standing. Take 48 hours. But remember, we're moving quickly on this deal. If you want to influence the outcome, you'll need to act decisively. After he left, I remained at the table, my coffee growing cold as I processed what had just happened. Kevin had offered me a potential lifeline, a way to reclaim my rightful place at Turner Vineyards. But at what cost? And could I trust him? More importantly, was I willing to go directly against my father and brother with an outside investor? To potentially split my family apart over a business? As I drove to the vineyard, I realized I was approaching a point of no return. Whatever, I decided in the next 48 hours would determine not just my professional future, but the future of Turner Vineyards itself. I spent the entire day weighing Kevin's proposal. By evening, I'd made my decision. I stayed up late drafting an alternative business plan for Turner Vineyards, one that emphasized strategic growth while preserving our core identity. My vision maintained our commitment to sustainability while expanding our premium offerings and tasting room experiences. It was ambitious but responsible, innovative without betraying our heritage. When I finally crawled into bed after midnight, Nathan stirred. "How's it coming?" he murmured sleepily. "Done," I whispered. "I'm meeting Kevin tomorrow to present it." "Are you sure about this?" I stared at the ceiling in the darkness. "No. But I'm sure about what will happen if I do nothing." The next morning, I dropped the kids at school and drove to a cafe in the next town over to meet Kevin. He was already waiting, reviewing documents on his tablet. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said as I sat down. "Neither was I admitted, sliding my folder across the table. "But here we are." Kevin opened the folder and began reading my proposal, his expression giving nothing away. I sipped my coffee, trying to calm my nerves. "This is thoughtful," he said finally. "Measured expansion, premium positioning, leveraging your existing reputation while creating new revenue streams. It's solid. And achievable, I added, unlike Eric's fantasy theme park. Kevin smiled slightly. Your brother's plan has certain ambitious elements. Is that what we're calling delusions now? He set the folder aside. Here's where we stand, Rebecca. Meridian is interested in Turner Vineyards. The property has excellent potential, and the Turner name carries weight in the industry. But we have concerns about the leadership transition. Understandably. I've presented those concerns to your father. He was unreceptive. My heart sank. He's still insisting on Eric as CEO. He is, Kevin confirmed. However, we've proposed a compromise. A more structured leadership team with clearly defined roles. Eric would be CEO, but with limitations on his authority, particularly regarding major financial decisions. And where do I fit in this structure? As COO, with full control over vineyard operations and production. Equal voting rights on the executive committee. I considered this. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was better than being sidelined entirely. Did my father agree to this? Kevin's expression tightened slightly. Not yet. He believes it undermines Eric's authority. Of course he does, I said bitterly. Here's what you need to understand, Rebecca. Meridian won't proceed with the investment unless there are appropriate checks and balances in place. Your father needs our capital to fund Eric's expansion plans. That gives us leverage. I leaned forward. So what happens now? Now we negotiate, and I use your alternative business plan to demonstrate that there are multiple viable paths forward for Turner Vineyards. Will it work? Kevin shrugged. That depends on how badly your father wants the money and how willing he is to compromise. But one thing is clear. You've made yourself impossible to ignore. I left the meeting, feeling cautiously optimistic. For the first time since my father's announcement, I had actual leverage. Meridian needed me, even if my family didn't want to admit it. When I arrived at the vineyard, the atmosphere was noticeably tense. Staff members avoided eye contact as I walked to my office. Something had happened. I found Grace waiting for me, her expression grim. Harold's looking for you, she said quietly. He's furious. My stomach dropped. He knows about my meeting with Kevin. Grace nodded. Eric saw you leaving the cafe together. Perfect, I muttered. Where is he? Main office, with Eric. I straightened my shoulders, preparing for battle. Thanks for the warning. The walk to my father's office felt like marching to an execution. I could hear raised voices as I approached, my father's deep rumble and Eric's higher, agitated tone. I knocked once and entered without waiting for a response. Both men turned to glare at me. Nice of you to finally show up, my father snapped. Care to explain why you're meeting secretly with our investors? I closed the door behind me. I wasn't aware that speaking with potential business partners required your permission. Don't play games, Eric snarled. You're trying to undermine. I'm trying to save this vineyard from your harebrained schemes, I shot back. Someone needs to provide a reality check before you run us into the ground. My father slammed his hand on the desk. Enough. This behavior is completely unacceptable, Rebecca. Going behind our backs, presenting unauthorized plans. Unauthorized? I laughed incredulously. I've been running this place for a decade. I've earned the right to have a say in its future. You work for us, Eric said coldly. You seem to have forgotten that. I turned to face him fully. And you seem to have forgotten that you know nothing about winemaking, vineyard management, or our business relationships. You've been here 6 months, Eric. 6 months? That's irrelevant, my father interjected. I've made my decision about leadership. Yes, and Meridian has made it clear they have concerns about that decision, I said, meeting his gaze steadily. They won't invest without appropriate governance structures in place. My father's face reddened. You told them that? They told me that, I corrected. After doing their due diligence and realizing that handing control to someone with no experience might not be the wisest business move. Eric stepped toward me, his face tight with anger. You think you're so clever, don't you? The indispensable Becca, the only one who can possibly run things properly. I don't think I'm the only one, I replied evenly. But I know I'm more qualified than you. Enough! My father roared, standing up. This ends now. Rebecca, you've left me no choice. You're suspended, effective immediately. 2 weeks, no pay. When you return, it will be with the understanding that you answer to Eric, period. I stared at him in disbelief. You're suspending me? For talking to investors about the future of our business? For insubordination, he corrected. For undermining the leadership structure I've put in place. Eric smirked triumphantly. I wanted to slap the smug expression off his face. And if I refuse to accept this punishment? I asked quietly. My father's expression hardened. Then you can clean out your desk permanently. The ultimatum hung in the air between us. I looked from my father to Eric, seeing the unyielding conviction in their eyes. They truly believed they were right, that I was the problem, not their archaic thinking. I see, I said finally. Then I'll take some time to consider my options. Your key card, please, my father said, holding out his hand. I unclipped it from my belt and placed it in his palm. You're making a terrible mistake. That's not for you to decide, he replied coldly. I turned and walked out, head held high despite the burning humiliation. Staff members quickly averted their eyes as I passed, but I could feel their stares on my back. News would spread quickly. Rebecca Turner, suspended for challenging her father's authority. I drove home in a daze, fury and hurt battling for dominance. When I pulled into our driveway, I sat in the car for several minutes, trying to compose myself before going inside. I couldn't let the kids see me like this. Finally, I went in and called Nathan at his office. I need you to come home, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I've been suspended. He arrived 30 minutes later, concern etched on his face. I told him everything, the confrontation, my father's ultimatum, the suspension. They can't do this, Nathan said, pacing our living room. You built that business. Apparently, I built it for Eric, I said bitterly. Nathan stopped pacing and sat beside me. So what now? I took a deep breath. Now I decide whether to accept this slap on the wrist and return as Eric's subordinate or I walk away and start something new. The thought had been forming in my mind during the drive home. Maybe this was the push I needed, the final confirmation that I would never be valued properly at Turner Vineyards, no matter how much I contributed. Do you want to walk away? Nathan asked carefully. No, I admitted. I love that vineyard. I've poured my heart into it. But I can't keep working somewhere that doesn't respect me. What about the investors? Kevin seemed to be on your side. I shrugged. Even with Meridian's backing, my father remains the majority shareholder. He can suspend me, demote me, or fire me. The best they could do is create some restrictions on Eric's authority, but I'd still be second in command at best. Nathan was quiet for a moment. There's another option, you know. What's that? Fight back, not just with alternative business. Plans or investor pressure? Really fight back. I frowned. What are you suggesting? Your father and Eric need that investment to fund their expansion, right? I nodded slowly. So make sure they don't get it, Nathan said simply. How would I do that? You said it yourself. You've built relationships with everyone in the SA industry. Use them. Let people know what's happening. Make sure every investor in the Valley hears about Harold Turner pushing out his experienced daughter in favor of his unqualified son. I stared at him. That would be nuclear, It could damage the vineyard's reputation. Maybe, Nathan acknowledged. Or maybe it creates enough pressure that your father has to reconsider. He'd never forgive me. Has he given you any reason to care about his forgiveness lately? The question hung in the air between us. Nathan was right. My father had shown no concern for my feelings, my career, or my contributions. Why was I still protecting his? I need to think, I said finally. Of course, Nathan agreed. But remember, you're not powerless here, Becca. You have options. That evening, I was still weighing those options when my phone rang. It was Kevin. I heard what happened, he said without preamble. Eric has been calling me all afternoon, trying to do damage control. I'm sure he has, I replied dryly. This complicates things, Kevin continued. Harold is demanding we proceed with the deal under the original terms. Full authority for Eric, no special provisions. And will you? No, Kevin said firmly. But we're at an impasse. Harold is threatening to walk away and seek other investors. Let him try, I said. Good luck finding someone to back Eric's wine theme park. Kevin was quiet for a moment. There's another possibility we haven't discussed. I'm listening. Meridian could back you directly. Not as an investment in Turner Vineyards, but as a startup, your own winery. My breath caught. You do that? We invest in people. As much as businesses, Rebecca. You've demonstrated expertise, vision, and resilience, all qualities we value. If Harold won't recognize your worth, perhaps it's time to build something that's truly yours. The offer was tempting, incredibly so. Yet something held me back. I'd be competing directly with my family, I said slowly. It would be seen as betrayal. More of a betrayal than what they've done to you? Kevin asked pointedly. He had a point, but still. I need time to think about this. Of course. But don't take too long. This situation is fluid, and opportunities don't last forever. After hanging up, I found myself staring out the window, at our backyard, where Zoe and Tyler were playing with the neighbor's dog. They looked so carefree, so untouched by the kind of family politics that were tearing me apart. What example did I want to set for them? To accept unfair treatment for the sake of family peace, or to stand up for myself, even if it meant difficult confrontations? The answer seemed clear when framed that way. I spent the next 2 days researching what it would take to start my own winery. I contacted real estate agents about available properties, spoke with equipment suppliers, and reviewed my non-compete clause in my Turner Vineyards contract. To my relief, it was narrowly written and would only prevent me from soliciting Turner employees or customers for 1 year. It couldn't stop me from starting a competing business. On the 3rd day of my suspension, my mother showed up at my door. She looked tired, the lines around her eyes more pronounced than usual. "Can we talk?" she asked. I let her in, offering coffee, which she declined. We sat in the living room, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. "Your father is very upset," she said finally. "I gathered that when he suspended me," I replied dryly. She sighed. "This has gotten out of hand, Rebecca. The investors are threatening to pull out. Eric is panicking. Your father won't admit it, but he's worried too. They created this situation, not me." "Be that as it may," my mother said carefully, "this conflict is hurting the vineyard. Is that what you want?" I studied her. What I want is recognition for my contributions. What I want is to not be passed over because I'm a woman. What I want is respect. "Your father respects you," she protested weakly. "No, Mom. He tolerates me. There's a difference." She reached for my hand. "Please, just apologize. Come back. To work. We can figure this out as a family." I gently withdrew my hand. "That's not going to happen. I'm not apologizing for standing up for myself." "Then what will you do?" she asked, a note of fear in her voice. I considered keeping my plans to myself, but decided on honesty. I'm thinking of starting my own winery. My mother paled. You can't be serious. I am. Kevin has offered to back me. Kevin from Meridian? The same investors who were considering Turner Vineyards? She sounded scandalized. Yes. That's betrayal, Rebecca. I smiled sadly. Funny how it's betrayal when I seek opportunity elsewhere, but perfectly acceptable when Dad hands my position to Eric. It's not the same thing, she insisted. Isn't it? The message is clear. Women in this family are expected to step aside for the men, to sacrifice their ambitions without complaint. I refuse to do that anymore, Mom. And frankly, it's disappointing that you think I should. She stood up, clearly agitated. You're not thinking clearly. You're angry, and you're making rash decisions that will hurt everyone, including yourself. I've never been thinking more clearly, I countered. For the first time, I'm prioritizing my own worth instead of desperately seeking Dad's approval. Your father loves you, she said, her voice breaking slightly. Maybe he does, I allowed, but he doesn't respect me professionally, and that's what this is about. She left shortly after, promising to talk to my father again, though we both knew it wouldn't change anything. The lines had been drawn, and we were on opposite sides. Later that afternoon, I received a text from Grace. Emergency meeting called. Eric in panic mode. Investors backing out. So Kevin had made good on his threat to withdraw Meridian's offer unless appropriate governance was established. I felt a surge of vindication, quickly followed by concern for the vineyard staff who would suffer if the expansion plans collapsed. My phone rang again. It was Miguel, our vineyard manager. Becca, things are crazy here, he said without preamble. Your father is on a rampage. Eric is shouting at everyone, and there are rumors of massive layoffs if the investment falls through. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. This wasn't what I wanted. We know that, Miguel replied. Look, the team wants to talk to you. Can we meet somewhere, away from the vineyard? Of course. When? Tonight? The Craftsman Brewery at 7? I'll be there. When I arrived at the brewery that evening, I was stunned to find not just Miguel, but nearly a dozen Turner employees waiting. Grace was there, along with Tina from the lab, Jose from maintenance, and several others from production and the FA tasting room. What's going on? I asked as I joined them at a large table in the back. Miguel glanced around the table, then back at me. We wanted to talk about what happens next. Next? Grace leaned forward. Harold announced this afternoon that if the Meridian deal falls through, he'll have to streamline operations until new investors can be found. He's threatening layoffs, Tina added, her voice tight, starting with the organic program, which he called Your Pet Project. I felt sick. He's punishing everyone associated with me. Jose nodded grimly. 20 years I've worked there. Now I might lose my job because the boss is angry at his daughter. I'm so sorry, I said, looking around the table. This isn't what I intended. We know that, Miguel assured me. That's not why we wanted to meet. We wanted to ask about your plans. I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Grace saw my reluctance. It's okay, Becca. We're all here because we believe in you, not Eric or even Harold. If you're planning something new, we want to know. I took a deep breath. I'm considering starting my own winery. Meridian has offered funding. A murmur ran around the table. Miguel smiled slowly. Now that's interesting. Would you need staff? Tina asked bluntly. I stared at her, suddenly understanding. Are you saying you'd leave Turner to work with me? Miguel shrugged. If Harold's going to fire us anyway for being your people, why not go where we're actually valued? But that would be a huge risk, I protested. A startup with no track record, no established vineyards? We'd have you, Grace said simply. Your knowledge, your vision, your approach to winemaking. That's what we believe in." I looked around the table, overwhelmed by their faith in me. These weren't just employees. They were colleagues who had worked alongside me for years, who understood what I was trying to build. "I don't even have a property yet," I said weakly. "The Mason estate is available," Jose offered. "My cousin works for the real estate company. 40 acres, southern exposure, good water rights. The house needs work, but the land is perfect. For vines." I knew the property. It had been on the market for months, overpriced and overlooked. But Jose was right. It had excellent potential. "I'd need experienced staff willing to work for equity until we're established," I said slowly. "It would be a huge risk." "Some risks are worth taking," Miguel replied. "What do you have in mind?" For the next 2 hours, we talked through what a new venture might look like, who would come, what roles they would fill, what we would need to get started. The energy around the table was electric, a mix of excitement, nervousness, and determination. By the time we left the brewery, a plan was forming. Not just a business plan, but a vision for something new, something that embodied all the principles I believed in, something that could actually be better than what I'd been trying to create within the constraints of Turner Vineyards. When I got home, I found Nathan waiting up for me. "How did it go?" he asked. I sat beside him, still processing. "It was incredible. They want to come with me, Nate. If I start something new, they're willing to leave Turner to be part of it." He smiled. "Of course they are. They know who really built that vineyard success." "This changes everything," I said. I wasn't sure I could start from scratch, but with a team like that, "You can do anything," he finished for me. For the first time since my father's devastating announcement, I felt a genuine surge of hope. Not just anger or determination, but actual excitement about what might lie ahead. The next morning, I called Kevin. "I need to meet with you," I said. "I've made my decision." We arranged to meet at a restaurant halfway between Sonoma and San Francisco. When I arrived, Kevin was already there, reviewing documents as usual. "You look different," he observed as I sat down. "More resolved." "I am," I confirmed. "I'm ready to discuss terms for a new venture." He nodded, unsurprised. "I thought you might be. What changed?" I realized I've been trying to fix a situation that doesn't want to be fixed. My father and Eric are determined to do things their way, regardless of the consequences. Maybe it's time to let them. "While you build something of your own," Kevin added. Exactly. I passed him a folder containing my revised business plan. "This outlines what I'm proposing. A boutique winery focused on organic, small-batch production, premium pricing, direct-to-consumer emphasis, with strategic distribution through select partners." Kevin flipped through the document. "This is essentially what you wanted to do at Turner, but without the baggage. And without the limitations," I added. "I'd have complete creative control." "The startup costs are significant," he noted, studying the financial projections. "Yes, but the return potential is excellent. And I'd be bringing a team with me, experienced professionals who know exactly what they're doing." Kevin's eyebrows rose. "Turner employees?" "People who believe in my vision," I said carefully, "who might find themselves unemployed soon anyway, given my father's threats." "That changes the equation," Kevin acknowledged. "Experience is valuable, especially in the early stages." We spent the next hour discussing specifics, funding levels, equity splits, timelines. By the end, I had a verbal commitment from Meridian for initial funding, pending final documentation and due diligence. "There's one more thing," I said as we wrapped up. "I'd like to move quickly on the Mason property, before word gets out about what I'm planning." Kevin nodded. "I'll have our real estate team contact them today. We can make an all-cash offer." As I drove home, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: excitement about the future, sadness about leaving Turner behind, and lingering anger at my father's stubbornness. I was making the right decision for myself, but the cost was high. When I pulled into our driveway, I was surprised to see Eric's car parked on the street. He was sitting on our front steps, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "What are you doing here?" I asked cautiously as I approached. He stood up, running a hand through his hair. "We need to talk." "I have nothing to say to you." "Please, Becca," he said, his voice strained. "It's important." Against my better judgment, I let him in. We stood awkwardly in the living room, neither willing to sit. "What do you want, Eric?" He paced nervously. "The Meridian deal fell through officially this morning. Kevin called Dad to tell him they're withdrawing their offer." "I'm aware," I said neutrally. Eric stopped pacing and faced me. "What I don't understand is why they reached out to you directly afterward." Dad's assistant overheard him shouting about it on the phone. So my father knew Meridian was considering backing me instead. That explained Eric's visit. "That's between me and Meridian," I said coolly. "They're investing in you, aren't they?" Eric demanded. "You're starting a competing winery." I saw no reason to deny it. "Yes." Eric's face flushed with anger. "How could you do this to us? To the family?" "How could I?" I laughed incredulously. "After you took my position, dismissed my accomplishments, and treated me like an underling? After Dad suspended me for having the audacity to suggest I might know something about the business I've run for a decade?" "This is different," Eric insisted. "This is deliberate sabotage." "No, it's self-preservation. You and Dad made it clear there's no future for me at Turner, so I'm creating my own future." Eric's expression shifted from anger to calculation. "Dad will never forgive this. You'll be cut off completely." "I've already been cut off," I pointed out. "Suspended, demoted, disrespected. What exactly am I losing that I haven't already lost?" He changed tactics. "What about Mom? This will break her heart." "Don't bring her into this," I warned. "She's chosen her side. She always does." "And the rest of the family? Thanksgiving, Christmas? You're willing to sacrifice all of that?" I stepped closer to him. "Let me be very clear, Eric. I didn't create this situation. You and Dad did, when you decided my gender made me less qualified to run the business I've dedicated my life to. Any consequences are on you, not me." He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head. "You know what? Dad was right about you. You've always been selfish, always thought you knew better than everyone else." "Get out," I said quietly, my anger cold and controlled. "And tell Dad that if he wants to discuss this like an adult, he can call me directly. I'm done using you as a messenger." After Eric left, I sat on the couch, trembling slightly from the confrontation. There was no going back now. The lines had been drawn, and I had definitively chosen my path. My phone buzzed with a text from Kevin. "Mason property owners are interested. Meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. This is happening." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. The path forward wouldn't be easy. There would be more confrontations, more accusations, more pain. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was moving toward something, not just away from something. I was building my own legacy, one that couldn't be taken away because of outdated beliefs about who deserved to lead. And if my family couldn't support that, then perhaps they weren't the family I needed right now. The family I was creating, Nathan, our children, and the loyal team willing to follow me into a new venture, was more than enough. The Mason property exceeded my expectations. Standing on the hillside overlooking 40 acres of potential vineyard land, I felt a surge of possibility. The morning sun illuminated the gently sloping terrain, perfect for grape cultivation. The soil samples Grace had secretly sent for testing confirmed what I suspected. This land had excellent drainage, mineral content, and pH balance. "What do you think?" Kevin asked, watching me survey the property. "It's perfect," I admitted. "South-facing slopes, natural windbreaks, good water access. The terroir has incredible potential." "The house needs work," he observed, nodding toward the weathered farmhouse at the edge of the property. I smiled. "The house is irrelevant. It's the land that matters." Kevin nodded, understanding. "So we make an offer?" "Yes," I said decisively. "Full asking price, quick close." As we walked back to our cars, Kevin outlined next steps. "We'll establish the company structure this week. Mitchell Vineyards, correct?" I paused, considering. "No, not Mitchell." I looked back at the hillside, imagining rows of vines stretching across it. "Phoenix Ridge." Kevin raised an eyebrow. "Rising from the ashes?" "Something like that," I said with a small smile. The next week passed in a whirlwind of activity. Legal paperwork, business plans, banking arrangements. Launching a new venture required 1,000 details, each demanding attention. I worked from home, sending emails, making calls, and meeting with suppliers. Nathan converted our guest room into a temporary office where I pinned maps and sketches to the walls, visualizing what Phoenix Ridge would become. Through it all, my phone remained conspicuously silent. No calls from my father or mother, no text messages from Eric. It was as if my family had decided that if they couldn't control me, they would simply erase me. Only my mother sent a single text. "Please reconsider. Family is everything." I didn't respond. 10 days after my suspension, with the Mason property purchase in escrow and Phoenix Ridge Vineyards officially incorporated, Grace called me in. A panic. "Your father found out," she said immediately when I answered. "About Phoenix Ridge, about all of it." My stomach tightened. "How?" "I don't know. But he's on a rampage. He's called an all-staff meeting for this afternoon. Everyone's terrified." "Has he said anything specific?" Grace lowered her voice. "He's promising to blacklist anyone who goes with you. Says he'll make sure no one in the valley will hire them. He's already reached out to other vineyard owners." The vindictiveness stunned me. "He can't do that. It's illegal." "Legal or not, it's scaring people. Miguel and I are still with you, but others are wavering." I closed my eyes, thinking quickly. "Tell everyone to stay calm. I'll handle this." After hanging up, I paced my home office, fury building. It wasn't enough for my father to push me out. Now he was threatening the livelihoods of people whose only crime was loyalty to me. I called Kevin. "My father knows about Phoenix Ridge. He's threatening to blacklist anyone who leaves Turner to join me." Kevin's response was measured. "We anticipated this possibility. It's why we kept the incorporation paperwork private." "He's scaring my team," I said, frustration bleeding through. "People who can't afford to risk their reputations." "Then we accelerate our timeline," Kevin said simply. "How quickly can you gather your core team?" "Today, if necessary." "Do it. We'll have contracts ready by this evening, formal offers, with signing bonuses and guaranteed severance if things don't work out. Make sure they understand we'll defend them legally if Harold follows through on his threats." I spent the next hour calling key people individually: Miguel, Grace, Tina, Jose, and 4 others who had expressed interest in joining Phoenix Ridge. Most answered in whispers, fearful of being overheard at the vineyard. "Meeting at my house. 7 p.m., I told each of them. "Formal offers will be ready. It's time to decide." By early afternoon, my anxiety had shifted to determination. I was sitting at my kitchen table reviewing equipment quotes when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find my father standing there, his face flushed with anger. "Phoenix Ridge?" he said without preamble. "You're actually starting a competing vineyard?" I stepped back, allowing him to enter but maintaining distance between us. "Yes." He followed me into the living room, his movements stiff with rage. Do you have any idea what you're doing? The damage this will cause? I'm creating my own opportunity since you made it clear there wasn't one for me at Turner. With our investors, he shouted. You stole our investors. I didn't steal anyone, I replied evenly. Meridian made a business decision. They chose to back someone with experience over someone with connections. My father paced the room, his control slipping. And now you're poaching our employees, people I've paid and trained for years. People you threatened to fire for being associated with me, I countered. People you tried to blacklist throughout the valley. Did you really think they'd remain loyal after that? He stopped pacing and faced me. This isn't just business, Rebecca. This is family. You're betraying your family. The accusation stung despite my armor. Family works both ways, Dad. You betrayed me first when you handed everything I built to Eric. That was my right as the owner. And this is my right as a professional, I interrupted. To take my skills elsewhere when I'm not valued. He shook his head, his expression hardening. If you do this, there's no coming back. You understand that? No reconciliation, no holidays, no relationship with your mother and me. The ultimatum hung in the air between us. I had expected it, but hearing it spoken aloud still hurt. That's your choice, I said quietly. I'm not the one drawing that line. The hell you aren't, he exploded. You're the one creating a competing business. You're the one stealing our people, our investors. Because you left me no alternative, I shot back, my composure finally breaking. You handed everything I worked for to Eric because he's your son and I'm just your daughter. After 10 years of dedication, that's all it came down to. Biology. So don't talk to me about betrayal when you couldn't even see past your own outdated prejudices. My father stared at me, momentarily silenced by my outburst. Then his expression shifted, calculation replacing raw anger. There's still time to fix this, he said, his tone suddenly reasonable. Come back to Turner. I'll reinstate you as Director of Operations, reporting directly to me until Eric gets more experience. We'll forget this Phoenix Ridge nonsense. I almost laughed at the transparent attempt. You're only offering because you're afraid I'll succeed. I'm offering because despite your rebellion, you're still my daughter, he said stiffly. I don't want to see you fail. You mean you don't want to see me succeed without you, I corrected. The answer is no, Dad. Phoenix Ridge is happening. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. Then we have nothing more to discuss. I guess we don't. He turned to leave, pausing at the door. You know, your grandfather would be ashamed of what you're doing. He believed in family loyalty above all else. The parting shot was designed to wound, and it did. My grandfather had been my inspiration, the one who first taught me about viticulture, who believed I had an intuitive understanding of wine. No, Dad, I said softly. Grandpa believed in recognizing talent regardless of gender. He was the one who insisted I go to viticulture school when you thought it was a waste. He saw my potential even when you couldn't. My father didn't respond, just walked out, closing the door firmly behind him. I stood in the silent living room, shaking slightly with adrenaline and emotion. The confrontation had gone exactly as expected, yet it still left me raw. Despite everything, some part of me had hoped for understanding, for recognition. That hope was now definitively extinguished. I was still processing when Nathan came home early from work, concern etched on his face. Grace called me, he explained, pulling me into a hug. Said Harold was on his way here. Are you okay? I leaned into his embrace. He gave me an ultimatum. Phoenix Ridge or family, not both. Nathan held me tighter. I'm sorry, Becca. I'm not, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. For the first time in my adult life, I'm making choices based on my worth, not his approval. It hurts, but it's also freeing. Later that evening, our living room filled with nervous energy as 8 Turner Vineyards employees gathered, speaking in hushed tones despite being away from the vineyard. I recognized the risk they were taking just by being here. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "I know today has been difficult and confusing. My father's threats were inappropriate and, frankly, illegal." Miguel nodded grimly. "He made it very clear what would happen to traitors, as he called us." "That's why we've accelerated our timeline," I explained, gesturing to Kevin, who stood nearby with a stack of folders. "These are formal employment offers for positions at Phoenix Ridge Vineyards. Each includes a signing bonus, guaranteed severance if things don't work out, and legal protection against any retaliation from Turner Vineyards." I paused, looking at each person individually. "I want to be completely transparent. This is a startup. There will be challenges and uncertainties. We're building something from the ground up, and that's never easy. I can't promise immediate success, but I can promise that your contributions will be valued, your expertise respected, and your loyalty rewarded if we succeed." Grace spoke first. "I've worked for Harold Turner for 20 years. In that time, I've watched Becca transform a struggling family business into a respected winery. The innovations, the sustainability program, the quality improvements, those came from her, not Harold, and certainly not Eric. I know who I want to work for." She stepped forward and took a folder. Miguel followed. "My father worked these vineyards before me. He always said, 'Follow the winemaker who respects the land.' That's you, Becca." He took a folder as well. One by one, the others stepped forward. Tina from the lab, Jose from maintenance, 3 production workers, and finally, to my surprise, Caitlin from marketing, who hadn't been on my original contact list. "Eric fired me this afternoon," she explained, seeing my confusion. "Said I was too closely associated with your programs." My anger flared anew, but I contained it. "His loss is our gain. We'll need strong marketing." Kevin stepped forward. "For those accepting positions, we'll need signatures tonight. Phoenix Ridge takes possession of the Mason property on Friday, and we'd like to announce our full team at that time." As people reviewed contracts, asking questions and discussing roles, I moved among them, addressing concerns and outlining my vision for Phoenix Ridge. Despite the circumstances, excitement was building. This wasn't just a refuge from Turner Vineyards. It was a genuine opportunity to create something innovative from scratch. By the time everyone left, we had 8 signed contracts, a core team with over 70 years of combined experience in vineyard management, winemaking, and operations. It was a solid foundation for Phoenix Ridge. "That went well," Kevin observed as we gathered the signed paperwork. "Better than I expected," I admitted. "Though I'm concerned about my father's threats." "Let me worry about that," Kevin said. "Meridian has considerable influence in this region. If Harold wants to play hardball, he'll find we have a much bigger bat." The next morning, I received a text from Miguel. 7 resignations submitted this morning, including mine and Grace's. Eric is apoplectic. Your father locked himself in his office. I forwarded the message to Kevin, who responded immediately. "Excellent. Legal team standing by if needed. Property closing tomorrow at Achal. 10 a.m. Be ready for announcement at noon." I spent the day finalizing details for Phoenix Ridge's public launch. Nathan took the day off to help, making calls and organizing paperwork while I focused on our press strategy. Zoe and Tyler sensed the excitement, asking questions about the new grape place and whether they could help. "Absolutely," I assured them. "Phoenix Ridge will be a family business in the truest sense." That evening, as we finished dinner, the doorbell rang. Nathan answered it, returning with a puzzled expression. "It's your mother, and Eric's wife, Vanessa." I frowned, instantly, suspicious. What do they want? They wouldn't say, just that it's important. I found them waiting in the living room, my mother looking tired and Vanessa uncomfortable. Neither sat despite Nathan's offer. "Mom," I greeted cautiously. "Vanessa, this is unexpected." My mother stepped forward. "Rebecca, this has gone far enough. You've made your point. Now it's time to be reasonable." "I'm being perfectly reasonable," I replied. "I'm pursuing a business opportunity." "By destroying your family's business?" Vanessa interjected. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Eric is devastated. Your father is talking about selling the vineyard entirely." That surprised me. Selling Turner? He'd never. "He says there's no point continuing if you're determined to compete against your own family," my mother explained, her voice strained. "He's already spoken to a real estate agent about listing the property." I studied them both, searching for manipulation. Why should I believe this isn't just another tactic to make me feel guilty? "Because it's true," Vanessa said flatly. "Harold showed us the listing agreement this afternoon. He's giving up." I felt a twinge of guilt despite myself. My father's identity was inextricably linked to Turner Vineyards. For him to consider selling was unthinkable. "What exactly do you want from me?" I asked cautiously. My mother seized. "The opening. Stop this Phoenix Ridge venture. Come back to Turner. Your father is willing to reconsider the leadership structure. Eric would be CEO, but you would have equal authority as COO. All major decisions would require both of your approvals." "The same compromise Meridian suggested," I noted. "The one Dad rejected 2 weeks ago." "He's reconsidered," my mother insisted. "You've forced his hand, Rebecca. He sees now that the vineyard needs both of you." I glanced at Vanessa, whose tight expression suggested this compromise wasn't her idea. "And Eric agrees with this arrangement?" She hesitated. "He understands the necessity." Translation: Eric was being forced to accept the compromise to save the family business. Part of me enjoyed the irony, but a larger part recognized the manipulation at work. "This is quite a coincidence," I said carefully. "The day before Phoenix Ridge's public launch, suddenly Dad's willing to compromise, after telling me yesterday that I was dead to the family if I proceeded." "People say things in anger," my mother pleaded. "You know your father. He's stubborn, but he loves you." "He loves control," I corrected. "And he's panicking because he's lost it." Vanessa stepped forward, dropping the conciliatory act. "Listen, Becca, this little power play has been impressive, but it's time to end it. You've proven your point. Now come back and take the deal before you destroy everything." Her condescension triggered something in me. "This isn't a power play, Vanessa. It's my career, my professional identity, my future. I'm not doing this to prove a point. I'm doing it because I deserve better than being sidelined in a business I helped build." "And you're willing to ruin your family over it?" my mother asked, tears forming. "I'm not the one who made this a choice between family and career," I said gently. "Dad did that. He's the one who decided I had to accept a subordinate role or be cast out. He's the one threatening to sell rather than see me succeed independently." My mother wiped her eyes. "Please, just meet with him. Hear him out." I considered it briefly, then shook my head. "I'm sorry, Mom, but I don't trust this sudden change of heart. Phoenix Ridge launches tomorrow. If Dad wants to talk after that, when I'm operating from a position of equality rather than supplication, I'm open to it." "You're making a terrible mistake," Vanessa snapped. "That's my risk to take," I replied evenly. After they left, Nathan found me on the back porch, staring at the stars. "You okay?" "I think so," I said slowly. Part of me wanted to take the deal, to have both the vineyard and my family, but it felt like a trap. Because it probably was, Nathan agreed. Your father hasn't suddenly developed respect for you overnight. He's panicking and trying to regain control. I nodded. Once he had me back at Turner, once the Phoenix threat was gone, he'd find a way to sideline me again. Nothing would really change. Exactly, Nathan said, wrapping an arm around me. You've drawn a line, Becca. That's hard, but it's necessary. That night, I barely slept, turning over the conversation with my mother and Vanessa. Was I being unnecessarily stubborn? Should I have at least met with my father? By morning, I had pushed the doubts aside. Phoenix Ridge was happening. I would not be swayed by last-minute manipulation. The property closing went smoothly. By noon, I stood on the hillside of what was now officially Phoenix Ridge Vineyards, surrounded by my core team, with Kevin and a small group of local press looking on. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter in Sonoma viticulture, I began, feeling a surge of pride despite my nerves. Phoenix Ridge Vineyards is founded on principles of sustainability, innovation, and excellence. With our experienced team, we will create wines that honor this exceptional terroir while pushing boundaries in organic viticulture. I introduced each team member, highlighting their expertise and contributions. The reporters seemed particularly interested in the exodus from Turner Vineyards, though I carefully avoided criticizing my family directly. This is about looking forward, not back, I emphasized. We're focused on what we're building here, not what we've left behind. As the event concluded and people began to disperse, I noticed a black SUV parked at the bottom of the drive. Even from a distance, I recognized my father's vehicle. He hadn't attended the announcement, but he'd been watching. The SUV pulled, away as soon as the press began to leave. I felt a pang of sadness, wishing things could have been different. But the die was cast now. Phoenix Ridge was real, and there was no turning back. That evening, Nathan organized a small celebration at our home for the Phoenix Ridge team. As we toasted our new venture, my phone rang, an unknown number. Stepping away from the group, I answered cautiously. Rebecca Mitchell. Ms. Mitchell. This is Thomas Brentwood from the Sonoma County Planning Department. My pulse quickened. Yes, Mr. Brentwood? I've received some concerning information about your new venture, Phoenix Ridge Vineyards. There appears to be an issue with the property's agricultural zoning permits. That's impossible, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We conducted thorough due diligence before purchasing. All permits are in order. Nevertheless, we've received a formal complaint alleging improper land use. We'll need to conduct an investigation, which unfortunately means all development must cease until this matter is resolved. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. May I ask who filed this complaint? I'm not at liberty to share that information, he replied smoothly. You'll receive official notification by mail within 3 business days. After hanging up, I immediately called Kevin and explained the situation. Harold's behind this, Kevin said without hesitation. He's using his connections to throw regulatory roadblocks in our way. Can he do that? I asked, pacing my bedroom to keep the conversation private from our guests. He can try, Kevin said grimly. But Meridian has considerable experience navigating regulatory challenges. I'll have our legal team on this first thing tomorrow. In the meantime, proceed as planned with equipment deliveries and hiring. We're on solid legal ground. When I rejoined the celebration, I maintained a confident exterior, but inside I was seething. My father was declaring war, using his influence to sabotage Phoenix Ridge before we'd even begun. The next morning, the local paper ran a story about Phoenix Ridge's launch. It was mostly positive, highlighting our sustainability focus and experienced team, but there was also a quote from my father. Turner Vineyards wishes all new ventures success, but we caution consumers about operations that attempt to leverage our reputation without our decades of expertise. Quality winemaking requires more than ambitious claims and borrowed talent. The dismissive tone was vintage Harold Turner, simultaneously condescending and threatening. I clipped the article for motivation, a reminder of exactly why I'd needed to break free. Later that day, Grace called with more news. Turner just announced a loyalty discount for distributors who commit to exclusive relationships. It's clearly aimed at preventing anyone from carrying Phoenix Ridge wines. Can they afford that kind of discount? I asked, surprised. Their margins were already tight. They're taking a loss to block you, Grace confirmed. Eric is calling every distributor, personally, offering incentives if they agree not to carry Phoenix Ridge when we have product. My father was willing to damage Turner financially just to ensure Phoenix Ridge failed. The vindictiveness was stunning, yet somehow not surprising. What about Sarah at Westfield? I asked, thinking of our most important potential distribution partner. She's been avoiding Eric's calls, Grace said with a hint of satisfaction. Word is she's waiting to see what Phoenix Ridge produces before making any commitments. A small victory, but I'd take it. Sarah's support could be crucial when we eventually had wines to sell. The regulatory challenge proved to be just the first in a series of obstacles. Over the next week, we encountered delivery delays with Vineyard, equipment, sudden cancellations from contractors who'd agreed to renovate the property buildings, and rumors circulating in the industry that Phoenix Ridge was underfunded and unlikely to survive its first year. Each setback had my father's fingerprints on it, never obviously enough to prove, but the pattern was clear. He was using every connection, every favor, every bit of influence he'd accumulated over decades to strangle Phoenix Ridge in its infancy. I gathered the team in our makeshift office in the farmhouse, determined to address the situation head-on. I know the past. Week has been challenging, I began, looking at the concerned faces around me. My father is using his influence to create obstacles for us. That's unlikely to stop anytime soon. Miguel shook his head. It's worse than I expected. He's called in every favor in the valley. He's scared, Grace observed. He wouldn't be fighting this hard if he didn't believe we could succeed? Exactly, I agreed. And that's what we need to focus on. Yes, he's making things difficult, but we have advantages he can't touch: expertise, innovation, and freedom from the constraints of tradition. Turner is locked into old ways of doing things. We're not. The question is whether we can survive long enough to prove ourselves, Tina said pragmatically. These delays are costly. I nodded, acknowledging the concern. Kevin and I have discussed this. Meridian is prepared to increase our initial funding to weather this storm, but we also need to adapt our strategy. I outlined the changes we'd need to make: sourcing equipment from outside the region to avoid local interference, bringing in contractors from San Francisco rather than relying on local firms susceptible to my father's influence, and accelerating our direct-to-consumer marketing plans to reduce reliance on traditional distribution channels. It won't be easy, I concluded, but remember why we're here. Not just to build another winery, but to create something truly exceptional. Wines that reflect the best of this land and our collective expertise. My father can delay us, but he can't stop us if we stay focused on that vision. The team's determination was palpable as we dispersed to implement our revised plans. The attacks had actually unified us, creating a shared sense of purpose that transcended individual roles. That evening, as I updated Nathan on the situation, the doorbell rang. We looked at each other in surprise. It was nearly 9, late for casual visitors. Nathan opened the door to find Eric standing on our porch, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. His usual polished appearance was replaced by rumpled clothes and tired eyes. "I need to talk to you," he said to me, ignoring Nathan. "It's late." "Eric," I replied warily. "It's important." There was an urgency in his voice I hadn't heard before. Reluctantly, I nodded for Nathan to let him in. Eric declined a drink and remained standing, too agitated to sit. Dad's losing it, he said without preamble. This vendetta against you, it's consuming him. He's making irrational business decisions, alienating partners, burning bridges. That's not my problem, I said carefully. He made his choice. Eric ran a hand through his hair. You don't understand. He's putting the entire vineyard at risk. The discounts he's offering to block Phoenix Ridge are unsustainable. He's pulling money from operational accounts to fund them. Quality is suffering. This caught my attention. What do you mean, quality is suffering? He's cutting corners everywhere. Cheaper barrels, rushed processing, reduced testing. He's so focused on defeating you that he's compromising everything Turner stands for. I studied my brother, looking for signs of manipulation, but all I saw was genuine distress. Why are you telling me this? I asked finally. Eric paced the living room. Because despite everything, I care about Turner Vineyards. It's our legacy, yours and mine. Dad's destroying it out of pride and stubbornness. And you're just now noticing his pride and stubbornness? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. I deserve that, Eric admitted, surprising me. I was selfish, Becca. I wanted the title, the authority, the recognition. I didn't think about what it meant to actually run a vineyard day to day. His candor was unexpected. What are you asking from me, Eric? He stopped pacing and faced me directly. Help me stop him before it's too late. Come back to Turner, not as my subordinate, but as my partner. True co-leadership. I laughed. Incredulously, you can't be serious. After everything that's happened? I'm deadly serious, he insisted. Dad's not listening to me. He's dismissing every concern, every warning, but he might listen to both of us together. You had your chance to stand. With me weeks ago, I reminded him. You chose Dad's side. I was wrong, Eric said simply. I didn't understand what I was getting into. Running Turner is harder than I imagined, especially without your expertise. And now with Dad's vendetta consuming everything. I shook my head. I've started Phoenix Ridge. I have investors, employees who left Turner to join me, commitments. I can't just abandon that. What if there was a way to merge the ventures? Eric suggested. Phoenix Ridge's innovations with Turner's established brand? We could create something stronger than either would be alone. The proposal was tempting, a way to preserve both my new venture and my family connection. But years of experience with my father made me skeptical. Dad would never agree to that, I said. He sees Phoenix Ridge as a betrayal. He might if the alternative is losing Turner entirely, Eric countered. The vineyard's financials are worse than you know. This fight is accelerating a decline that was already underway. I studied my brother, seeing real fear in his eyes. You're genuinely worried. I am, he confirmed. Dad's made so many enemies in this campaign against you that even if Phoenix Ridge failed tomorrow, the damage to Turner would remain. We need a solution that preserves both the business and the family. The sincerity in his voice gave me pause. Was reconciliation actually possible? Or was this another manipulation, more subtle than my father's, but manipulation nonetheless? I need time to think about this, I said finally. And I'd need to discuss it with my team and investors. They've taken risks for Phoenix Ridge. I won't betray that trust. Eric nodded. That's fair, but please don't take too long. The situation at Turner is deteriorating daily. After he left, Nathan and I sat in silence, processing the unexpected visit. Do you believe him? Nathan asked eventually. About the vineyard's troubles? Yes, I said. It fits with what we've heard from others. About wanting a true partnership? I shrugged. I'm less certain. It could be a trap, Nathan warned. Get you to abandon Phoenix Ridge, then push you out again once Turner is stabilized. It could be, I agreed. Or it could be a genuine recognition that the current path is unsustainable for everyone. I stared out the window into the darkness, weighing decades of family history against the possibility of reconciliation. The decision before me wasn't just about business strategy. It was about identity, trust, and the possibility of healing wounds that had festered for years. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked softly. "I'm thinking that whatever I decide will shape not just my future, but the future of 2 vineyards and all the people who depend on them," I replied. "And I'm not sure what the right answer is." The ultimate test wasn't just overcoming my father's opposition. It was finding a path forward that honored both my own worth and the legacy my family had built. Whether that meant continuing the fight with Phoenix Ridge or finding a way to reconcile with Turner Vineyards remained to be seen. As I climbed into bed that night, one thing was certain. The next few days would determine not just my professional future, but the possibility of healing a family fractured by pride, tradition, and misplaced values. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the path forward had never been less clear. I barely slept that night, Eric's unexpected proposal circling in my mind. By morning, I knew I needed objective advice before making any decision. I called Kevin and asked him to meet me at Phoenix Ridge, neutral ground where we could speak freely. The farmhouse kitchen had become our makeshift headquarters, with renovation plans and vineyard layouts spread across the sturdy oak table. Kevin arrived just as I was reviewing equipment orders that had been mysteriously delayed. "Eric came to see me last night," I said without preamble, pouring us both coffee in chipped mugs. Kevin's eyebrows rose. "That's unexpected. What did he want?" I explained Eric's proposal, the partnership, the potential merger of Turner and Phoenix Ridge, his claims about my father's deteriorating business decisions. "Is it possible?" I asked when I finished. "Financially, legally, could the 2 businesses be combined in some way that protects everyone's interests?" Kevin considered this, running calculations in his head. "Structurally, yes. We could design a holding company that owns both brands, with clear operational separation but shared resources. The question is whether it makes strategic sense." "And does it?" "That depends on what you want, Rebecca," he said carefully. "Meridian backed Phoenix Ridge because we believe in your vision and leadership. We're prepared to weather your father's attacks. But if a merger prevents a destructive competitive war and preserves value in both properties, we'd consider it, with appropriate protections for your position." I sipped my coffee, thinking. "You believe Eric is sincere?" "I believe he's desperate," Kevin replied, "which sometimes looks like sincerity. The question is whether his desperation will translate to actual respect for your expertise once the immediate crisis passes." It was the heart of the matter. I'd spent my entire career fighting for recognition from my father and brother. Could I trust that they'd finally seen my value, or was this just another manipulation born of necessity? "I need to see the Turner financial records," I decided. "If things are as bad as Eric claims, there will be evidence, and I need to speak with my team. They left Turner to join Phoenix Ridge. They deserve input on any potential merger." Kevin nodded approvingly. "Due diligence first. Smart." I spent the morning calling the Phoenix Ridge team together for an emergency meeting, then texted Eric. "Need to see complete Turner financial records for the past 6 months. Full transparency. Or no discussion." His response came quickly. "I'll get them to you today. Thank you for considering this." The team gathered at the farmhouse that afternoon, curious and apprehensive about the unexpected meeting. I explained Eric's visit and proposal without editorializing, watching their reactions carefully. "It could be a trap," Miguel said immediately. "Get us all back under Harold's thumb, then push us out once Turner stabilizes." Grace nodded. "Harold's vindictiveness runs deep. I'm not convinced he'd ever accept true partnership with you, Becca." "But if Turner's really in trouble," Tina pointed out, "a merger might be the only way to preserve both ventures." Starting from scratch with Phoenix Ridge means years before production reaches meaningful levels. Jose, who'd been quiet, finally spoke. My family has worked Turner land for 3 generations. I left because of how they treated you, Becca, not because I wanted to see the vineyard fail. If there's a way to save both, I'd support it. Their divided perspectives reflected my own ambivalence. There were valid arguments on both sides. I won't make any decision without your support, I assured them. You took risks to join Phoenix Ridge. Your futures are tied to this decision, too. What does Nathan think? Grace asked. He's concerned it's a trap, but recognizes the potential benefits if it's genuine, I replied honestly. He's worried about the emotional toll either way. Miguel leaned forward. Whatever you decide, we're with you. But verify everything before trusting Eric or your father. By evening, Eric had delivered the financial records as promised, complete with profit and loss statements, cash flow projections, and bank account summaries. Grace and I spent hours reviewing them at my dining room table, the evidence of Turner's decline painfully clear in the numbers. He wasn't exaggerating, Grace said, pointing to the vineyard's cash reserves, which had plummeted 70% in 3 months. These discounts are bleeding them dry. And look at these production costs. They've cut quality control staff by half. The reserve wines will suffer, I noted, studying the barrel aging schedules. They're rushing bottles to market that should be aging at least another year. Short-term thinking, Grace agreed, sacrificing long-term reputation for immediate cash flow. The records confirmed what Eric had claimed. My father's vendetta against Phoenix Ridge was accelerating Turner's financial problems. But they also revealed something more troubling. The vineyard had been struggling before our conflict began. My father's management decisions over the past year had already weakened Turner's position. He was setting Eric up to fail, I realized. Aloud. Even without Phoenix Ridge, Turner was heading for difficulty. Which makes me wonder if Harold has other plans, Grace said thoughtfully. Maybe he never intended Eric to succeed long-term. The insight struck me like a physical blow. What if my father's real plan had been to install Eric temporarily, then sell Turner to a corporate buyer once I was pushed out? It would explain the hasty leadership transition, the lack of proper succession planning. The next morning, I called. Eric. I've reviewed the financials. We need to talk, all of us, you, me, and Dad. Dad won't agree to that, Eric said immediately. He's still furious about Phoenix Ridge. Then this conversation is over before it begins, I replied firmly. I won't negotiate with you alone when he remains the majority shareholder and decision-maker. Eric was silent for a moment. Let me see what I can do. No promises. 2 hours later, he called back. He's agreed to meet. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. at the house. Just the 3 of us. The prospect of facing my father again sent anxiety spiraling through me. I called Nathan at work. Dad's agreed to meet, tomorrow morning. Do you want me there? He asked immediately. I considered it. No. This needs to be just the 3 of us. But I'll call you right after. Be careful, Becca, he cautioned. Your father is cornered now. That makes him dangerous. The warning stayed with me as I prepared for the meeting, reviewing Turner's financial documents again and outlining potential solutions that would protect both vineyards' futures. I slept poorly, dreaming of vineyards withering on the vine, of barrels cracking open, wine pouring out like blood. The next morning, I drove to my parents' Victorian home on the Turner property, the place where I'd grown up. As I parked beside Eric's car, memories flooded back. Harvest celebrations on the wide porch, Sunday dinners in the formal dining room, learning to prune vines with my grandfather in the surrounding vineyards. This place had shaped me, for better and worse. Now I was returning not as the dutiful daughter, but as an equal, a competitor, perhaps even a savior. My mother answered the door, her expression a mixture of hope and anxiety. Rebecca, she said, stepping back to let me in. Thank you for coming. Eric said it would be just the 3 of us, I replied, noting her presence. It will be, she assured me. I'm leaving for town. I just... She hesitated. I just wanted to see you. The vulnerability in her voice softened something in me. I'm sorry this has been hard on you, Mom. She touched my arm briefly. Just listen to each other today. That's all I ask. After she left, I found Eric and my father waiting in my father's study, the room where he'd conducted Turner business for decades, where I'd often been summoned for criticism disguised as feedback over the years. My father looked older than when I'd last seen him, the lines in his face deeper, his posture less commanding. He didn't stand when I entered, just watched me with wary eyes. Thank you for coming, Eric said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. I've explained to Dad why I think we need to find a solution that preserves both Turner and Phoenix Ridge. My father grunted. You've explained your opinion. I haven't agreed to anything. At least we're talking, I said, taking a seat across from him. That's a start. Let's be clear, my father said brusquely. I agreed to this meeting because Eric believes Turner's future depends on reconciliation. I remain unconvinced. The financial records tell a different story, I replied evenly. Turner is in trouble, Dad, with or without competition from Phoenix Ridge. His eyes narrowed. You think you understand Turner's finances from a few spreadsheets? This vineyard has weathered challenges before you were born, Rebecca. Not like this, I countered. Not while sacrificing quality and brand reputation for a personal vendetta. Eric intervened before our father could retort. We're not here to assign blame. We're here to find a path forward that benefits everyone. I nodded, forcing myself to stay calm. I've reviewed Turner's situation carefully. I believe there's a solution that preserves both vineyards while respecting everyone's contributions. I'm listening, my father said stiffly. I outlined my proposal. A holding company that would own both Turner Vineyards and Phoenix Ridge, with clear separation between the brands but shared resources where it made sense. Turner would maintain its established identity while Phoenix Ridge would focus on innovation and organic methods. Eric and I would co-lead the combined entity, with my father transitioning to chairman emeritus. This gives Turner the benefit of Meridian's investment without selling control to outsiders, I explained. It ends the destructive competition between us and creates a stronger total enterprise. My father listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. And what happens to the Turner name? He finally asked. The legacy my father built, that I've protected for 40 years? It continues, I assured him. Turner Vineyards remains exactly what it's always been. A respected producer of classically styled wines. Phoenix Ridge becomes our innovation arm, exploring new approaches without diluting the Turner brand. 2 brands, 1 family, Eric added, stronger together than separate. My father stood abruptly and walked to the window, looking out over the vineyards that stretched to the horizon. His vineyards, the land he'd worked since he was a boy, that he'd expected to pass down through generations. I never wanted this conflict, he said without turning. I just wanted what was best for Turner. We all want that, I said quietly. We just disagree about what best means. He turned to face me. You really believe you can run Phoenix Ridge and co-manage Turner with your brother after everything that's happened? I believe we can try, I replied honestly. With clear agreements, defined responsibilities, and mutual respect. It won't be easy, but it's better than destroying both ventures out of pride. My father looked at Eric. And you? You're willing to share leadership after I promised you full control? Eric met his gaze steadily. I'm willing to acknowledge that I need Becca's expertise. These past weeks have shown me that running Turner is more complex than I realized. And frankly, Dad, your scorched earth campaign against Phoenix Ridge has made my job impossible. The blunt assessment seemed to surprise my father. He returned to his chair, suddenly looking very tired. I've spent my life building this vineyard, he said slowly. following in my father's footsteps, preserving his methods, his values. The thought of changing that. He shook his head. Grandpa was an innovator in his time, I reminded him gently. He was one of the first in the valley to use stainless steel fermentation when everyone else thought it was sacrilege. A ghost of a smile touched my father's lips. He took hell for that from the old-timers. They said he was ruining winemaking tradition. And now it's standard practice, I noted. Innovation and tradition aren't enemies, Dad. They're partners. That's what this merger could represent, honoring the past while embracing the future. He studied me for a long moment. You've always been stubborn, just like him. Just like you, I countered. He nodded, acknowledging the truth of it. I need time to think, and I'll need to see detailed terms, ownership percentages, management structure, safeguards for the Turner brand. Of course, I agreed, careful not to show too much eagerness. Meridian's legal team can draft something for review. My father stood, signaling the end of the meeting. I'll consider your proposal. That's all I can promise today. It wasn't the immediate reconciliation Eric might have hoped for, but it was more than I'd expected. My father was at least willing to consider the merger, rather than dismissing it outright. As we walked out together, Eric touched my arm. Thank you for coming, for being open to this. I haven't agreed to anything yet either, I reminded him. My team needs to be protected in any agreement, and I won't compromise on quality or sustainability practices. Understood, he said, surprising me with his easy acceptance. One step at a time. Driving home, I felt a strange mixture of hope and caution. The meeting had gone better than expected, but decades of family dynamics couldn't be resolved in a single conversation. Trust would take time to rebuild, if it could be rebuilt at all. Nathan was waiting when I got home, concern etched on his face. How did it go? Better than I feared, not as well as I hoped, I replied, sinking onto the couch beside him. Dad didn't reject the idea outright. He's going to consider it. That's something, Nathan acknowledged. Do you think he's sincere? I considered the question carefully. I think he's pragmatic. He sees that his current approach is failing, and he's looking for an alternative that preserves his dignity and the Turner legacy. And Eric? Seems genuinely chastened by his experience trying to run things, I said. Though whether that humility would last once the crisis passes is another question. Nathan put his arm around me. What does your gut tell you? I leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. That this could work, with the right structure and protections. But it will never be easy. The wounds are too deep for that. Over the next week, a tentative negotiation process began. Kevin arranged for Meridian's attorneys to draft merger documents that protected everyone's interests. Eric and I met several times to discuss operational details, gradually finding common ground on how the combined entity might function. My father remained largely on the sidelines, reviewing proposals but offering little input. His silence was concerning, but Eric assured me he was engaged in the process, asking questions and considering options. The Phoenix Ridge team remained cautiously supportive, recognizing the practical benefits of merging with an established vineyard while harboring understandable reservations about working with my father again. I promised them protection in any agreement, guaranteed positions, authority over organic practices, and autonomy within the Phoenix Ridge brand. 10 days after our initial meeting, my father finally requested a private conversation. We met at the Vineyard Overlook, a small hill with a bench where generations of Turners had come to contemplate the vines and find clarity. I've reviewed the merger proposal, he said as we sat side by side, looking out over the orderly rows of vines stretching across the valley. It's more fair than I expected. It's designed to benefit everyone, I replied. There's no point in an agreement that leaves anyone feeling cheated. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. I've been thinking about my father lately, about what he would make of all this. What conclusions have you reached? I asked carefully. My father sighed. He was progressive in many ways, technically innovative, forward-thinking about wine trends. But he was also a man of his time, with certain traditional views about family and leadership. Like passing the business to his son rather than his daughter, I noted. Yes, my father acknowledged. Though in fairness, my sister never showed interest in winemaking. The question never really arose. But it arose with me, I said. I made my interest and commitment clear for a decade. You did, he agreed, surprising me. And I failed to recognize that properly. My decision to favor Eric wasn't based on capability, it was based on tradition. On doing things the way they'd always been done. The admission, so long in coming, left me momentarily speechless. I'm not saying I was wrong to want Eric involved in the leadership, my father continued. He's my son, and he has valuable perspectives and skills. But I was wrong to dismiss your contributions and expertise, to make it an either-or proposition when it could have been both and. Thank you for saying that, I said quietly. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge it. He turned to look at me directly. I'm not good at admitting mistakes, Rebecca. You know that about me. But these past weeks, watching Turner suffer without your guidance, seeing the loyalty you inspired, in the team members who followed you, it's forced me to reconsider many things. And your conclusions? That Turner Vineyards needs you, he said simply. That your brother needs your partnership, and that I've been a fool to let pride and outdated thinking nearly destroy what 3 generations have built. I studied him, searching for signs of manipulation or insincerity, but all I saw was exhaustion, regret, and a flicker of hope. The merger makes sense, he continued. 2 brands, different approaches, shared resources. Turner maintains its tradition while Phoenix Ridge explores new directions. It's actually quite elegant. It could be, I agreed cautiously, with the right structure and mutual respect. He nodded. I've added some conditions to the agreement. First, both brands retain distinct identities. No blurring of the Turner heritage with experimental approaches. Second, I remain involved as chairman emeritus for 3 years, with advisory capacity but no operational control. Third, you and Eric truly share leadership. Major decisions require both your approvals. The terms were reasonable, even protective, of my position. And after 3 years? I asked. After 3 years, I step away completely, he said, his voice catching slightly. The vineyard belongs to the next generation, to you and Eric as equals. It was everything I'd wanted. Recognition, authority, equality, yet something still troubled me. Dad, I need to know this isn't just a tactical retreat. That you won't undermine me once the merger is complete and Phoenix Ridge is no longer a threat. He was quiet for a moment. I understand your skepticism. I've given you ample reason for it. All I can offer is my word, and actions that will prove it over time. And Mom? How does she feel about this? A small smile touched his lips. Relieved. Hopeful. She's been caught in the middle of this conflict, torn between her husband and her daughter. The thought of reconciliation means everything to her. I nodded, understanding. My mother had always been the peacemaker, smoothing over conflicts, seeking harmony even at personal cost. What about Thanksgiving? I asked suddenly. Would we all be together, the Mitchells and the Turners? Is that what you want? He asked carefully. I want my children to know their grandparents, I said. I want family gatherings without tension and resentment. I want holiday traditions that don't come with conditions. Then yes, my father said firmly. Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays, all of it. Family is family, regardless of business arrangements. As the sun began to set over the vineyard, casting long shadows across the rows of vines, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a willingness to move forward, to create something new from the broken pieces of the past. "I accept your conditions," I said finally. "Let's finalize the merger agreement." My father extended his hand, and I took it, a formal gesture that somehow carried more meaning than an embrace would have. We were making a pact, professional and personal, that would reshape both our relationship and the future of Turner Vineyards and Phoenix Ridge. The merger proceeded quickly after that. Legal documents were signed, announcements prepared, team integration planned. The industry responded with surprise and interest. The Turner-Phoenix merger represented something new in the valley, a blending of established tradition and innovative approach under shared family leadership. 3 months. Later, I stood in the renovated Phoenix Ridge tasting room, watching as the first guests arrived for our grand opening. The space beautifully balanced rustic and modern elements, with expansive windows showcasing the newly planted vineyard blocks. Nathan came to stand beside me, pride evident in his smile. "It's magnificent, Becca. Everything you envisioned." "Not quite everything," I admitted. I never envisioned reconciliation with my father and brother. Never thought Turner and Phoenix could exist together. "Life rarely follows our exact plans," he observed. "Sometimes it's better for it." Across the room, I saw my father Deeps, in conversation with Miguel about trellising systems for the new plantings. 2 men who months earlier had been bitter adversaries, now sharing knowledge and experience. Eric was showing Sarah from Westfield Distribution our innovative wine preservation system, his enthusiasm genuine for techniques he'd initially dismissed. And my mother was with Zoe and Tyler, helping them arrange welcome flowers for the tasting. Bar, 3 generations connected by more than just DNA, by a shared heritage of wine and family and land. The path to this moment had been painful, filled with conflict and heartache. The wounds weren't fully healed. Perhaps they never would be. Trust was still fragile, requiring constant nurturing and occasional repair. But as I watched my children, laughing with their grandmother, I knew the struggle had been worth it. I had refused to accept less than I deserved, had stood firm in my value and vision. That courage had ultimately transformed not just my professional standing, but my family relationships as well. Phoenix Ridge and Turner Vineyards would continue to evolve, each with its distinct identity yet strengthened by connection. And I would lead them both, alongside my brother, proving that the most complex and satisfying wines come from vineyards where tradition and innovation flourish side by side. "Ready to welcome our first guests?" Nathan asked, squeezing my hand. I looked around once more at the room filled with family, friends, and colleagues, people who had weathered the storm alongside me, who had believed in my vision when it seemed impossible. "Yes," I said, stepping forward with confidence. "I'm ready." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.